You're listening to School Solutions Talk, an exploration into the development of school culture and community through the integration of solution-focused practice. Here are your hosts, Tara Gretton and Vicki Essebag. Our sponsor, the Instructional Coaching Group, is the global destination for coaching and education, grounded in more than 25 years of research focused on improving teaching, strengthening leadership, and increasing student success. The Instructional Coaching Group partners with schools and systems worldwide to build sustainable coaching practices that support educators and improve outcomes for students. Learn more at instructionalcoaching.com.
Hi, everyone. This is Vicki Essebag, and here we are with Tara Gretton and Cynthia Franklin today on this hot summer's day. And I just want to welcome Cynthia. Thank you so much for coming and joining us here today, Cynthia, on the podcast.
My pleasure, to be here, and watch you a lot in the social media, and very impressed with the podcast.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, we usually start by reading out the bio, and I just Cynthia said, Vicki, feel free to pare down the bio, and I did pare it down a bit, but honestly, I just felt it was so important to include the elements, many of the elements in the bio, because truly, Cynthia, you have been doing some incredible work over the years in the field of social work and solution focus, and as a prolific researcher and writer. And honestly, it is our honor and our privilege to have you join us today. I'm going to read the bio out. So Dr. Cynthia Franklin is an internationally recognized scholar, educator, trainer, and clinician. Among many awards and recognitions, she was named among the 100 most influential contemporary social work faculty worldwide. Dr. Franklin's groundbreaking contributions have shaped the global development of solution-focused brief therapy, social work, and evidence-based mental health practice. Widely regarded as one of the foremost authorities on SFBT, she has devoted more than 3 decades to advancing research, teaching, and implementation of strengths-based interventions across educational, clinical, and community settings. Throughout her distinguished academic career, she has worked to expand access to effective care for children, adolescents, families, and underserved populations, including individuals with developmental challenges and autism spectrum disorders. Dr. Franklin serves as the Stiernberg Spencer Family Professor in Mental Health and Director of External Relations at the University of Texas at Austin Steve Hicks School of Social Work, and holds a courtesy appointment in the Department of Psychiatry at Dell Medical School. Dr. Franklin has authored more than 200 scholarly publications, including over 16 books, which have influenced scholarship, policy, and professional practice. She is a highly sought-after international speaker, trainer, and consultant, and holds many additional leadership positions, including as editor-in-chief of the Encyclopedia of Social Work, published by Oxford University Press, and, let's not forget, her continued dedication to promote evidence-based research as a legacy member of the Solution-Focused Brief Therapy Association's Research Committee. Welcome, Cynthia.
Thank you very much, Vicki and Tara. It's really my privilege to be able to speak to you today about something that's near and dear to my heart, and that's solution-focused brief therapy in schools.
Yeah, Cynthia, it really is such an honor for us to have you here, and really grateful that you accepted the invitation. And, it's hard not to be, a bit sort of starstruck, really. being,
Please.
for both
Please.
of us. And
This means I've been in the field a long time.
well, in the time that you've been in the field, you've done some incredible work that we're really excited to have the opportunity to talk to you about, and I know for both Vicky and I, your work in schools has, made a real difference to our work, and coming from a social work background as well. I know for me as a social worker, it's again a real privilege to be able to speak to you about that too. So our first question is, we're just kind of really curious to hear about your journey with solution-focused practice in schools and what first drew you to bringing this approach into educational settings and what has kept you passionate about it.
Well, thanks for the question, Tara and Vicky. And I do want to say it's, I'm so glad to have you guys in the field. Y'all are really the forward voice of this work that I've been doing. And what really drew me, to the work in the schools, like any, I think, social worker, clinician, practitioner, helping professional, your work is usually personal and professional. It goes, both ways with that. And so I had a really deep conviction that the best way I could ever help young people was be to help them get their education. And that really started in my family because my dad was, came from the Native American communities, and he was a cotton farmer in Oklahoma. Actually, my family, had doctors in it, and people like that, but they lost all of that during the Great Depression, the 1930s in the United States. And so, he preached to me all the time, that get your education. That's the best way, because he was totally illiterate. He could not read or write, having, worked on the farm, his whole life. And so he had a deep conviction about what education meant. And I've lived that out in my own experience. I had a lot of influential teachers, people that really, helped me, see that education was important and getting my education was really meaningful. So I did really believe that helping young people in school, was very important. And when I worked with students in schools, I could see that they did not get that kind of positive message all the time when they were in the schools. They really struggled. It was like, it wasn't that the young people left the schools left the young people. And we really needed to create different kinds of schools. And I did that early on in my career. And that was even my dissertation research. And I was trained as a family therapist and was drawn to solution-focused breathe therapy and was, trained in it, at the Milwaukee clinic with Enzu Kimberg and Steve Shazer. And so I just really got on that path to help young people and help develop school programs that had a solution focus, more resource-based orientation to help young people develop their preferred features, the outcomes they wanted, and to create a different kind of environment around young people so that they could succeed and take advantage of what I believe was the path to success, and that is getting your education. And that meant a lot to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No,
Tara.
you go. No, you go. You go.
No, I was just, I loved what you said, where you said the schools left the young people. The young people didn't leave the schools, but the schools left the young people. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, just in my work with young people in schools, what I saw is a lot of young people that really they had difficulties, and they struggled in school programs. Maybe these issues they had that were related to their family or related to mental health challenges they had or related to even, coming from more impoverished backgrounds or different cultural backgrounds than their teachers in schools really offered to them. And so the school was not flexible. It did not draw on the strengths of these young people. It did not understand these young people. It didn't really know how to provide the right kind of environment where they could really excel and succeed, and where their strengths could be realized. I believe that they all have strengths, gifts, resources in which we can draw on, as part of the solution-focused practices, and they didn't really tune in on this. Instead, they, just kept doing their practices that often were quite rigid and authoritarian, and they didn't really include the voices of young people. Of course, this is not every school, but it was many schools. And so young people would drop out of these schools, or they would, leave the schools and not get their education. And that compromised their independent living, their success. Is certainly in our society in the United States, it's important to have a good education. People that have good education make more money. They do better in life overall. And so, I just noticed that, working with them. And I really believed that we could create a better school system.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, Cynthia, so much that you say speaks to so much of what we're really, really passionate about, and really couldn't agree more with you. And I suppose that through my own experience over the years, it seems to be getting easier, but sort of in the beginning for me, which wasn't really, it was sort of 2010, it seemed it took some time for people to sort of understand and to see the usefulness of an approach like solution focused, and thinking about how do we have these types of conversations with young people? How do we do this in the school environment? And so I'm really curious about, how did you do it in the beginning?
Well, that's a good question. Of course, in the beginning, I worked more like in the counseling practice in schools, where we were, pulling kids out of the classrooms. We did research on it too, and and would do the solution-focused practices with the counselors and as social workers in schools and mental health professionals in schools. But I quickly saw that, that wasn't going to have the greatest impact, on young people. I'd worked a lot, in different settings and youth services, as a therapist, like I worked in residential treatment centers, and I worked with psychiatry practices and things like in hospitals and things like that. And I knew you had to have some kind of, therapeutic type of environment around young people. It couldn't just be some talking in a session and then you would just send them back to the same environment. I mean, that would be true in the family too, in working with the family to help the family when you're working with a young person. So I began to see that if we pulled some teachers into it, for example, and got teachers involved in the practices, and we started, not with Garza, but with other schools, and, just getting them involved, just a pod of teachers in a school, that would be willing to learn and do some professional development on it. And then I could see that really made a big difference. And then when the social workers that were delivering the mental health counseling in schools, if they involved the teacher more, if they were collaborative with them, and help them also, get in the conversation. So it was really like a one-on-one by interested people and teachers, because teachers really do care, many teachers. That's why they get in the field. I remember Enzyclopedia even talking to teachers about, why did you become a teacher? What caused you to be a teacher, when she was, working with me in schools. And they would, she would get them talking about their story, about how they really wanted to make a difference in young people's lives. And so we would grab teachers, out of a high school that, that had that kind of passion, and help them remember and teach them and the skills of solution-focused conversations. They're not therapists, but we use the language solution-focused conversations, and we would teach them how to do that. So I started there. And then finally, I got an opportunity to actually do a whole school, Garza High School in Austin, Texas, that was really looking to implement the solution-focused approach. It was the principal that wanted to do it. And to make a long story short, she saw the school social workers doing it and making such a huge difference. And she just said, I want that, whatever that is you're doing, talking to those students. I want that, and I want everyone to have it. And this one school social worker said, well, if you really want it, then you should get Cynthia Franklin at UT Austin, at the University of Texas at Austin School of Social Work, because she was an expert in it and working in schools. And so they called me, and I got a chance to, then do a larger training, got a grant from the Hogg Foundation for Mental Health to give the grantor, credit. and they made it possible for us to train everyone, on it then. And so that's the way we first had a model school then, that we could do. But it just starts, Tara and Vicki, just you got to start in a school where the people are, where their needs are, and just start a one-on-one, just anyone that's interested, in learning and, try to, bridge with the principal to support the work. And, when you do that, then you can get more and more people. It's just like a team, like getting a team and, around it. And then that's how we started getting it into the school. So we would teach them, the solution focused, we teach them how to ask the miracle question, how to, focus on the preferred future, how to, draw out the strengths and competencies of a student. And we teach them to speak that way. So it's amazing, really. It sounds so simple, what words can do. Steve DeShazer said words are originally magic, but I kind of think that words are very powerful and creative. Words are very powerful and creative, and they can just do amazing things.
Can you give us an example, something that stands out for you as work that they were doing in Garza that was solution focused and that was being applied into the classroom?
Yeah, there are so many, different examples, but one of the things they did at Garza is they adopted, this is very programmatic, but they adopted the SMART goals. And then they had a competency-based curriculum so that students could, actually move toward their goals. And so then they would have teachers meet with the students and have these solution-focused conversations that would, talk about their goals, where they were on their goals. It's almost use the scaling questions and, all kinds of, solution focused techniques with it. So that's one of the things that they did that was, very programmatic. I think it made a big difference. And, they would really approach students differently in the classroom. I mean, there's so many good cases of it, and in the whole school environment. We wrote a book about Garza, and this program has a lot of cases in it, solution-focused brief therapy in alternative schools. And we wrote a second one that just came out from Garza that has these cases in it too, but it's called Solution-Focused Brief Therapy Toolkit for Schools, and it has a lot of the things that they do. But one of the things I noticed just working with them in the classroom is they just knew how to allow students to do their work and support them. And when they would even have like meltdowns and things like that, they would support them. They would help them, through that type of process. They would, ask them questions like, if they said they couldn't do math or something, well, tell me a time that you did a little bit better at math. They would just talk like that to the students and just use the talking in the classroom. It's actually in the classroom. In the early days, we actually had them keep the questions on cards in the classroom, and before they knew it really well, and they would have these little cards, so they could look at the cards and remember the questions. They put them in a group, and they would ask the miracle question, and then they'd have them go around and do like round robin and answer the question in the group like that. They would do things like that, and they worked as a team. That's the other thing they had was really powerful. Early in the work, we actually had almost like reflecting teams in there where one student was struggling, but they would have an advocate appointed to them. That could be a teacher or anyone that they related to, they had a relationship with, and they'd bring them in and they'd just process it using the solution focused conversations and work through later they developed a whole team where they would bring the students, that were struggling and put them on the screen, and then they would think of ways to approach them and and they would talk about them and in the team meeting in a solution focused conversation too. That's important because that's at another level, so that they would be saying things like, tell me, some strengths or resources that he's brought to the classroom, and they would be talking about, things that they had done that worked, already with the student, and they would just be chatting about, what the student's goals are and what they really want, what they want to be different in their lives, and things like that. And then they would bring it back, into their classrooms and into the counseling, with the students. So, you see how this works. It's just like I called it a transdisciplinary team, because we really took the language of solution-focused therapy, which was in social work and counseling, and gave it in the hands of everyone that worked with students in that school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so those are a few examples, and they're just amazing. There are others if
Wow. Thank you.
a few examples of doing how they did the program and how they did the solution-focused conversations.
Yeah.
I can't remember who this quote comes from, but it's just came to mind as you were talking about language as well, and about conversation. And it's like, change the conversation and you begin to change what becomes possible.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's like I said, the words were originally magic, like Steve said, and I think they're very powerful and creative, and it's in that collaborative conversation. We call that co-construction, of course, in solution focused brief therapy. But being able to do that and know how to do that is really how to use language in a purposeful way that's helpful to people. And that's exactly what they do. They had the language as a tool. And, there's a lot of evidence-based mental health interventions in schools, and they're usually curriculums, like the tier 1 interventions and curriculums and stuff. But the really beauty of solution-focused therapy is that, you don't need a curriculum. You just need to know how to do the languaging with the students, and you can do it anywhere. That can be in the hall when they're having a problem. That can be on the phone if you need to talk to their parent. It can be, when they first come in the morning. And the principal of Garza High School used to say, one of the most powerful things you can do in the morning, if a student comes late and they appear to the attendance officer, basically we have to check in with attendance and everything. They say to that student, "I'm really glad to see you today," instead of, berating them or, correcting them for being late.
Yeah.
So,
Makes me think of Dan Siegel's "Connect before you correct."
yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, that's right. The, SFBT, is a very, I think the co-construction process is extremely a relational model. It's really about getting agreement with the clients, getting cooperation with the clients. That's what Enzu taught me, and I learned, that's very powerful, because if you can't get the cooperation, the agreement with your client, then, or your student, in our situations of working in schools, you're not going to be able to, guide or influence or, do interventions that are helpful, that they're going to cooperate with you. So it's because we also believe that, as that really the solution is in the client. It's client driven, it's client directed, and and that's what we taught those teachers, and they found that to be very powerful. And they would say, "I do this with my family. I do this in my own life. This has changed my life. It works with my son," or or something like that. It was kind of inspiring to hear them say that. And what I hear a lot of social workers or counselors or teachers say too is, it takes a lot of pressure off of you, because people think they have to solve the problems, and we're helpers, or professionals that are supposed to solve problems of people. And when you take that type of problem solving lens like that, there's a lot of pressure on you to come up with something that's going to work, and also to blame the client, blame the person, blame the student, if they don't change or it doesn't work, where when you take this client driven, comes from the client, comes from the person, kind of viewpoint, then that really the solution is in this conversation, and it's really inside this student. And my experience, young people are amazing. They're amazing, and coming up with their own solution.
Yeah.
And of course, what a beautiful training for teachers to understand that not knowing stance. And
Yes.
right,
Yeah.
and to back off from having to be the all-knowing, the fixer, and all of that, which is so ingrained in the teacher's role. And so, yeah, the beauty of just saying, hey, I don't have to know. I don't have to know the answer, and I don't have to solve the problem, is I think very liberating for a teacher.
I've been told that many times, and what we have taught them in the schools is that you don't have to know the answer; you just have to know the question. you know, you just have to know how to listen. Well to the student, and know the questions to ask. And one of the things that sometimes teachers ask or different people ask, say, well, what if the student says, I don't know? And so we just ask another question, or just let them have that space to think and, process that. You don't have to know, because that will make people very anxious. Well, then I have to do something else. But really, it is empowering to know that and to believe. It's really a belief that people can change, that these students have the capabilities and capacities to change. And, if we can provide the environment and right kind of, experience for them, that they will definitely show that to us.
Thanks to our sponsor, the Canadian Centre for Brief Coaching, the CCBC provides workplace training programs, coaching, and consulting to organizations across various sectors worldwide, all with solution-focused coaching as the fundamental educational framework. For more, visit pracademia.com. That's pracademia.com. Thanks to Family-Based Solutions, a charitable organization that aims to end the cycle of abuse in families and to repair relationships using the solution-focused brief therapy method. They offer counseling services, support groups, solution-focused training, online support, and global leadership to those who need it most. Learn more at familybassedsolutions.org.
What do you think schools can learn from creating spaces, from what the Gaza School has done? What can other schools learn from the Gaza School about, creating spaces for students to be active in co-creating their own learning journey?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. I think a lot of schools could really learn that, that there are many different ways for young people to learn, and but they really open the space and, put them in more of a competency-based kind of learning model like they have at the Garza School, that they will figure out ways to do that. Like, for example, Garza had a lot of blended or integrated curriculums. At one point they even had one where they did forensic sciences, but they were integrating, the sciences and different kinds of curriculum material that you normally would teach in the classroom, but they learned it more in this kind of applied way. And the students would, get very involved in that, in, structuring those courses. I think they also learned that some students like to learn online. They had a big online program and presence. They helped the school district that way with online programs, and there's different kinds of ways like that that students can learn. And the big thing I think that you could take away from a school like that is that it's good for school districts to have alternative education models, that where they can allow for, students, that don't fit necessarily into just the peg, the round peg in the round hole kind of thing, where they maybe are more creative or would prefer a different way, or maybe they just need that because of their life experiences, because they're homeless, or because they have family experiences that don't allow for them to keep a regular schedule, in a school the same way that they demand sometimes in the educational systems in the United States, at least. So things like that, the flexibility, I guess, as I would call it, flexibility of learning and seeing that you really can engage students, and it's not helpful and useful to just say these students are at risk. We really don't know how to help them, or they're not going to be able to be helped in education, or they're not good at math, or they're not good in academia or whatever, like that. Not labeling students that way, but instead of really working with the student, I guess really is what I saw. That they could take, to see what would work for them. We had a student that, one time he just muttered. He was on the spectrum, and he just would mutter like Japanese. He just wanted to study that all the time, and the schools just didn't really know how to help him. And he came over to Garza, and they took him and they accommodated to his style of talking and communicating and learning. And after a while, one of the teachers learned, because sometimes you ask in solution focus, just what are you good at? What are you interested in? Things like that. And so he learned, that he really liked video, technology, and they had a video class. And so they got him to come out of the back, room, muttering Japanese and stuff, and start participating in the school with because in this video class. And then it wasn't long, and I would see him. He'd be like in the, we were like in service trainings, and he'd be there, and he'd have his video, and he'd be talking to the teachers. So it's really amazing to see that kind of change. But that's based on really working with the strengths and being flexible, and looking for what will really work with each and individual student. And so I guess the individualization of Garza too, which is hard to do sometimes in large schools, but that's really important thing to take away. Any teacher can think about that way, approaching students with different learning needs that way, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's just so valuable. There's been so much research and so much conversation over the years around differentiated instruction, but
Mhm.
not really about differentiated instruction. I think, as solution focused leaders and practitioners, we know that it's really about honoring the individual, um, and not focusing so much on the instructional piece as much as on really just trying to understand who that young person is. Um, can you tell us a little bit about your work, the work that you've been doing with young people on the spectrum, young people with autism?
Yeah, it's been really a great honor to do this work, and it's really meaningful to me. I hadn't exactly worked in that space. I always worked with kids with a lot of different issues or comorbidities, and from mental health, substance use, social problems, all kinds of things like that, but not necessarily just focusing on youth and young adults with and transition age youth with autism. But we started getting a lot of those students over in Garza more. There's actually more over there than there ever has been in the past. And I have a colleague, Dr. Sandy Magana, and she's like an expert in this area. And we started having conversations about how she thought, and that solution focus would be an amazing intervention for this population. There's not a lot of mental health interventions, especially working individually with the student. A lot of them are really geared toward, the parents or changing the environment or, things like that, but not many where the person can really explore their own identity, their own individual goals, their own, things that they want that would help them, in a mental health therapy. And so we started talking about that. And so we got some research funding to do some feasibility studies on it, which what that means is we're first collecting the data, bringing some, people into the studies. And, we did a couple of years of that. And we got good results with it. One of the things we found was that that the young people would actually come to the sessions. That's important in a feasibility study. They would come we offered them 4 sessions, and then when we interviewed them, they said they'd like to have more sessions, and so now we offer them 6 sessions of SFBT. And they liked that, and they really liked exploring their strengths and their identity. They thought it was different. They made changes on measurement instruments too that we gave to them. So we were very happy to see that we were getting some good results with it, and that these young people really benefited from the solution focused therapy. So what we did is we now have gotten a large randomized clinical trial, which is really important for studying the efficacy of intervention to see if it really works. And we're just starting up that study now. It's quite large. It was a $850,000 trial, that we have on being able to work with adolescents and transition age youth with autism. So we're doing that. We hired a full-time therapist. I have a full-time therapist now, and he's wonderful, solution-focused trained social worker, and he's going to see our clients, and we'll probably have some backup, therapists too. Since we had to have a large sample, we didn't want to overwhelm him with that. But it's really great. It's really wonderful. And, we've been able to see that, these clients, that are on the spectrum, they can make, some amazing, kinds of changes, to doing the solution focused brief therapy. And we've learned a lot of creative ways to communicate with them as well, using solution focused brief therapy. So we adapted the intervention a lot and have it now in a training manual. And we offered a training. That's the other thing to therapists, because that's a part of our work, is to try to get more therapists trained so they get to deliver SFBT to people that have autism or autistic individuals. And I found in my work too, they just don't mind just saying, I'm a person, I'm an autistic person. That's the first person language. Is the third person language. A lot of people have autism prefer the first person language. And we're not taught that in social work, but that's what they prefer, with it. But when we offered this training, we had 500 therapists that signed up for it. So there's a real need,
Yeah.
a real need to train therapists, and so what we're trying to do is to lay down the groundwork so that in the research, so we can see if it actually is helpful and useful and works, and what you have to do to make it more useful and helpful and work, and through these adaptations. And so that's what our work's doing. So it's just really special kind of research.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
really, really exciting. And as a solution focused practitioner in schools, that's something that I would.
It's going to be very helpful to the practitioners in schools, I think, and and anyone, really anyone that wants to do the, like one-on-one counseling, or we're in this new study, our RCT, we're going to blend the one-on-one with some of the parents and family, because we just found that we had to do that, just because the client wanted it, or just because it was important to involve the parent, because they, it's like in solution, because they were the customer. They were really the ones that, really wanted the counseling, for their youth. And so we, intervene with, them too. The therapist would pull them into the room with them and stuff. So
wonderful.
So it's great. It's really
important to involve the parents. And I really look forward to hearing more about how this research evolves. Cynthia.
Yeah, we have it on a 2-year, where we'll be collecting the data, for 2 years. And and we do already have the training manual, and we're trying to decide when to release that, because we've been continuing to improve it based on what we learned from our therapists, and what we learned, from working with the clients. And so by doing that, the young people, taught us a lot about, how to use SFBT with them. It's just like, any situation, if you can learn a lot. And we really brought the therapy, we brought the autism advisory group into it. We have people, lots of really neat people on there too, on our team. We have students and we have people that have autism on there, and we have an autism advisory group that looks at the training intervention, manual, and gives us feedback. And they gave us lots of feedback about how to adapt the intervention, just in the beginning, even when we showed it to them. So again, you're just learning from, others, that letting them be the experts.
Yeah. And that's just so unbelievably important, isn't it? And, that is how the solution-focused approach, came to be born.
Yes.
That it was through observation, it was through observing practice, it was working within the conversations between the practitioner and the individual and the family, and that's just wonderful to hear that this manual it's still evolving and growing from people that are experiencing it. And that's incredible. I look forward to having.
Amazing. It really is. It's definitely a creative work. In real time. With the clients. And so you're so right, Tara, about it being born out of observation and of the interactions between client and therapist. And I think that is really at the heart of the co-construction, and is at the heart of solution focus, brief therapy too.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah.
I think we'll have to have like a part 2, because I think we're kind of moving. We could talk.
We're running out of time.
Great. But so our final sort of question for you, obviously after many years of working and researching and teaching solution focused practice, what is the one thing you wish every person working with children and young people understood about the conversations they have with them?
Oh, that's such an amazing question. And I would have to say that I wish they all knew, there's two things really. I guess they all, I wish they all knew the capacity that young people have really to change. That's, they can totally change. Like from the time they're 14 to the time they're 20 years old, they can just, totally change. I've seen it in the Garza High School, they go coming one way, they go out another way. So that's one of the things. And the other thing is that, that listening and working with the young people, that's really a sacred trust, really, to be able to do that. And they, are so amazing to come up with their own solution. Once they, they ask about their preferred future, for example, and because, young people, they really like to think about the future. They have a long future in front of them usually. And, and so once they have the details of that and they can think about that, they are amazing to come up with their own ways of running their life. And if I had to say a third thing, I would say that, young people don't always change in the way that adults or we think that they will. The change can be very incremental. It can be, very like, I can't believe it. I'm, remember working with a teen mom that, the teachers and everybody wanted to get her away from this boyfriend that was abusive, that was really in their mind to do it. And she wanted to marry him. And, and so she said, I'm just going to tell him we've got to get married and stuff like that. And they're going like, no. No way, don't do that. But the person that was running the group at that time with the person, they went with the client, and their solution to try it out and such. And so what happened is when she went home and she started doing that, he asked his mother, and his mother said, "No way you're going to marry that girl." And she said, "Well, I'm getting rid of him." Then, and so she broke up with him, And she said, "I don't want to marry him anymore. I don't want to be with him anymore. I don't like that." So they actually, the solution that they were all thinking of, that she needed to get away from him, actually it came out of something this teenager came up with that seemed so ill-advised, so ill-advised about it. So yes, as well. So they do change in small ways, and and incremental, and it sometimes doesn't make sense to us, but you can see they can come up with ways to run their lives that and change that we wouldn't think of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Belief in them, isn't it? And them having agency
Yeah.
to make those decisions. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And to try them out, and to let young people grow. And I had a student too that when she first learned about solution focused brief therapy, she goes, "This is never going to work." So because you got to let work with those teenagers to get the solution and all that. And she said, "It's amazing it works." It's amazing how that works.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Cynthia. This is really an incredible conversation, and so much, so inspiring, and so much to take from the things that you've shared with us. And I'm sure that our listeners will take so much from it too. So thank you for sharing your stories with us and inspiring us.
Thank you so much, Cynthia.
Thank you. I really appreciate featuring me on here, and I love this conversation. It's really great to talk to you, and I'm sure we'll be talking again soon.
Yes, I hope so.
Wonderful.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks to our sponsor, Work Collaborative, a not-for-profit movement that helps schools lead change from within. They trust that teachers, leaders, parents, and students have the capability to solve their own challenges when given the right support. Join this global movement of educators at workcollaborative.com. School Solutions Talk is produced by Tara Gretton and Vicky Esabag. If you like what you hear, please rate, review, and subscribe so that our podcast can reach even more listeners like you. Thanks for downloading.